Hello? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Good evening. Today is Monday, June 27th, 2022, and welcome to the school board special meeting. The time is now 6 p.m. The school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. Mrs. Tuttle, could we please get the roll call?
Certainly. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson is excused. Mrs. Matheson?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Here.
Thank you. The board has a quorum.
Thank you. First on our agenda are public comments, and they are limited to items on the agenda only. Core value, engage with students, family, staff, and community to support student success. Our public comments and input on the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. Currently, we have 2 people signed up for testimony. First, we have Aaron Crook. If you will come up, state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to testify. Aaron Crook. Susan Heinrichs. If you'll come up, state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to testify. Either microphone. Oh. Could you go ahead and turn the microphone on? State your name, spell your last name, area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Susan Heinrichs, Heinrichs. I live out in Goldstream. I want to address pay cuts for ESSA staff. And what I've heard proposed so far is a reduction of 5 or 6 workdays for the next year. This amounts to a 3% pay cut. And then under current bargaining, the district wants to increase our health insurance costs. Proposed amount would be about a 20% cut to my take-home pay, which would put me back to where I was about 10 years ago. And that would be my reward for loyalty and service. So far I'm looking at a 23% pay cut. I also heard that the district is considering reducing our paid vacation days during Christmas or spring break. I don't know if that's true. We only work 9 months a year. That might seem like it's a gift, but it's hard to make ends meet when you work 9 months a year. And because we only work 7 hours a day, a lot of us, that amounts to 5 weeks less than a person who works 8-hour days. I already work a second and often a third job to enable me to work for the school district, and I know a lot of ESSA staff does. If you cut our pay any further, a lot of us aren't going to be able to afford to work for you anymore. Inflation is sky high, yet you want to reduce our pay this year. The burden of funding public schools is on the taxpayers. It shouldn't even be legal to place the burden on select individuals who happen to work for the school district. If there's a budget problem, it's every taxpayer's responsibility. It's not just the employees. Thank you.
Mr. Doran.
Thank you, Ms. Heinrichs, for coming tonight and testifying. I just wanted to check, are you aware that as part of tonight's agenda is to consider restoring the 5 paid ESSA days that were removed in the previous budget?
I wasn't aware, but I would certainly like that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Aaron Crook. That is the list of people who have pre-signed up for testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify? If you'll come up, state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
My name is James Rogan. I work as a ESSA ER aide at West Valley High School. I'm hoping that our 5 days that we're talking about gets put back in the budget. I work hard for the school district. I need those extra 5 days to do extra training, talk to my teacher, talk to other teachers, and it would be a hardship to lose 5 days. So please put them back in our budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony this evening. Any further testimony? All right, seeing none, testimony has now public testimony has concluded. Next, we have our agenda. Our resolution 2023-01, adoption of fiscal year 2022-2023 school district approved budget. Core value, center everything we do on the student and student learning.
Move to approve Resolution 2023-01, adoption of the FY 2022-2023 school district approved budget for all funds and expenditures totaling $238,196,033, which includes the operating fund totaling $183,747,240 and the resulting CARES 2-3 list of expenditures.
Is there a second?
Second.
We now have the motion on the floor and it's been seconded. Is there anything further from administration?
Yeah, just to speak to the memo and the expenditures adjustments here. This list came from our work session, and the result of that work session, when we came out of it, these were the items that the board seemed to coalesce around and come to some general agreements. So that's how these expenditures were created. And the adjustments to the recommended budget to what we've done now for the approved budget. So just, a little bit of background on how this all happened.
And for the listening audience, those items on the memo are the kindergarten assistants, student activities, 5 paid workdays to ESSA school term employees, transfer to nutrition services, adjustments, TRS, TERS or PERS on behalf, addition to fund balance, and adjustment to charter schools.
So I might add, and just for clarification, the TERS PERS adjustment, that's money in, money out sort of thing. It looks kind of scary when it's in the red, but that's what that is, and similar with the transfer to nutrition services. You can look down, that nutrition services fund was adjusted to that amount. So those are how those numbers work. So if there's any other questions, we can entertain those now.
Thank you. And also, if I could just even clarify to the public that the reason why we're having this meeting in this manner is that we are still awaiting the governor to sign off on the budget, the state budget, which is a large portion of our funding source. And so this budget is our hopeful budget that we will actually receive what the state has initially shown as a possible approved budget from the state that we could be receiving. And so if we receive what we are hoping to receive, this will be our budget. If we do not get what if we get back a different number from the governor and from the state, this budget will have to change again, and we will have to come together again and discuss what the budget will end up being if changes are made at the state level.
Thank you, President Luke. And just to build on those points, the top line revenue items illustrated in Ms. Moline's memo reflect the budget bill that the legislature passed. There's also items in there, the additional funding from the Borough Assembly. And in addition to the budget bill that the legislature passed, the additional $30 to the BSA that was included in the READS Act. So those are the adjustments. And then as Ms. Moline mentioned, the TERS and PERS adjustment, the percentages, those are dollars in, dollars out. Those percentages that the state is collecting to maintain the state retirement system, those percentages went down significantly. And that's why there is a significant drop. So those are the adjustments. If there is any changes that the governor makes to these numbers, the board, this doesn't happen too often, but it has happened in the past, the board would make those adjustments, could make those adjustments in the fall, in either August or first part of September.
And there are, I guess, two ways that we can move forward as a board. And I have you down as your hand raised. There are two ways that we can go forward as a board. We can look at this list that was given to us by administration according to where we left off at our last work session. And we can create an amendment with all of these on there as one major amendment. Or we as a board can take each one of these items and do it individually. And that is a board decision moving forward. Mr. Doran.
Procedural question, but the first one is, could you, for the listening public, you give a nice outline of the things on the expenditures of the operating budget, but also the CARES adjustments that are under consideration tonight? It is, and I believe are part of our current motion. So.
Absolutely. And Mr. DeGraw, if you would.
Yeah, I can do that. Would it be helpful for the board to display my screen just to show, or you could refer to your CARES list, the draft CARES list in your packet. The adjustments, Mr. Doran, those are at the bottom of the list and they're bolded.
Right, I know.
Okay.
I really appreciated that President Luke stated for the listening public what the adjustments are that we're really considering
Like
tonight.
those stated as well.
I think we should complete that list. We did all of them except the CARES adjustments.
Sounds good, yes.
So there are 5 on that list.
So the 5 items are 3 FTE high school counselors, 1 each at North Pole High, West Valley, and Lathrop, for a total of $354,000. 2.0 FTE small school allocation teachers to Hutch, those would be restorations of positions, $236,000. A 1.0 FTE activity coordinator, those would be 2 positions at 0.5 each. Those are at small schools. It would be Eielson and Hutch for a total of $121,000. And then one-time $1,000 payments for both FPA as well as non-represented, and those are coming out of negotiations and the approval of the non-represented contract. $59,800 for FPA and then $196,000 for the non-represented group. So those additional items, and then the top, referencing the top of that memo, that illustration there, that increased expenditures out of CARES for FY23 to a little bit over $12 million. And then with the projected amount that we estimate to remain of a little over $15 million, that would leave an estimated amount right now of a little bit over $3 million remaining for FY24 budget purposes.
And procedurally, my question is, right now the motion does include all those adjustments. Great. then if you just put me in the key, I do have a couple of comments.
Ms. Marotti?
Thank you. When we spoke at the last work session, the scenario that I remember that was last on the screen provided $8.2 million in fund balance. That was 5 million fund balance from the general fund and 3.2 from CARES. Can you guide me to where we might see those numbers reflected somewhere?
Yeah, so you see the 5.1 million on the resolution, the 5.1 million on the first page of the resolution towards the bottom of the expenditure list. So 5.133 million, that's in addition to fund balance in the expenditure section. And then originally it was 3.2, Ms. Marotti, and then with the addition of the $1,000 one-time payments, it knocked it from 3.2 down to right around 3 million. So that's the difference from our last meeting to where the CARES list stands right now.
Okay.
And then with all the general fund items, yeah, the addition to fund balance landed at just over 5.1 million that's illustrated in the resolution.
Okay, so there's approximately 8.2 million in the general fund from different sources.
Correct.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, technically 5.1 in general, 3 million in
in
CARES.
CARES.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Gotcha.
Ms. Smith?
I just have a question. Would we be able to fund ESSA at 4 days instead of 5? And then by doing that, we would add in back in the activity coordinators, because as of what I'm seeing right now, the 5 days is costing $750,000, and that's $150,000 each of those days. And just by cutting one of those days, we could add back the 0.5 FTA at North Pole and the 0.5 at West Valley, and then add the district-wide one back to Lathrop. And then, because if the board is for student success, the thing that's going to give us the most success for our students is definitely going to be adding back the activities coordinators.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the short response is it's at the board's discretion. Absolutely, there's latitude to add 5 days back, 4 days back, et cetera, 3 days back. So that's 100% within the board's purview to take those actions.
Thank you.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you. Clarification and then a comment. Just on the one-time payments to FPA and non-represented, those numbers here also include the benefits section on that, those pieces that have to, because I know it exceeds the membership.
Yeah, correct. Yes, so it does, Mr. Dorn, to answer that question, it includes the benefit rate for each bargain, for both FPA, which is about 46%, and then it includes the non-represented benefit rate of about 61, 62%. So yes, benefits are included in those figures.
Okay. My comment is that I really appreciate the administration, the way you've outlined it in your memo and captured our conversations. I fully support this as presented right now and represented in our motion. I think it has taken a lot of the considerations into thought and discussion. And I think the one thing I would say in terms of activity coordinators, one of the things that is represented in our CARES expenditure is that we're funding 3 principals for the 3 large high schools and that was at their request also in lieu of separate activity coordinators, that those assistant principals would be able to take those duties and also offer broader services to the school and students and staff. So I am fully supportive right now of what we have before us, and I will be voting to approve that motion as it stands currently.
Mrs. Smith?
Thank you. Mr. DeGraw, can you clarify with me We've just heard a lot of testimony about how the employees need these 5 days because they do things on those days. They're doing training, they're doing this, like we just had testimony that, he needs that to work with his teacher without students there. I am confused regarding all of that testimony because it was my understanding from the start that these were non-student contact days, but also that they were going to be cut from times where no one was in the building, for example, Christmas break and spring break. And we have not defined the days, correct? So it is not that we're like cutting training for our ESSA employees or time that they would be working with their teachers without students present with the 5 days. Is that true?
So there's a lot of moving parts in that that question, Miss Smith. I'm unqualified to give information regarding what ESSA employees are doing the days the administration was considering for removing those days. I'm not qualified to inform the board on what they're doing on those days. They are non-student contact days, things like parent-teacher conference days, things of that nature. Again, I don't know what activities are going on with school term ESSA folks those days. To reference the Christmas break and spring break days, there was an attempt by the district to discuss reducing those days. So paid days that are the district's not open. So days that we're paying school term employees during Christmas break and spring break when they're not at work. And that conversation didn't last very long at the table with no progress. So there was an attempt, if we're looking at reducing days, certainly it was district's intent to first reduce paid days that the district's not open at all. Then we were looking at paid days that are non-student contact days, so progressing from, the least amount of value there to the district and students to, so on and so forth. So I hope I answered your question, Ms. Smith. If not, follow up and I'll try to.
Sure. Like, for example, I see that particularly nutrition services has that $64,000 broken out, like that's how much it would cost for the ESSA for nutrition services. And if it's like no students days, and then we're paying nutrition service people, so we're paying people to not work at the sacrifice of our students telling us that they need an activities coordinator, and we're sacrificing something that is extremely important to students and students' success to pay people to not work. I'm clear on that?
Yeah, I
That's
would.
a 0.5 FTE, right?
I would not dispute the point that you're making, the philosophical point you're making. I would point out and we haven't had a chance to talk about this, the topic hasn't come up with the board, specifically to the Department of Nutrition Services. Those employees actually are doing significant deep cleaning on those days that doesn't get done at any other time during the year. So specific to that department, those days are. And so I would state for the board officially, even if the board was looking at taking the 5 days back out, I would be a proponent of maintaining those days specifically for food services, mainly because they're doing that deep cleaning, and B, because that department is chronically, perpetually understaffed. This year we had central office admin in buildings serving meals all year long. And so, but I do not disagree with the philosophical point that you made, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I mean, just drawing it out even away from nutrition services in general, these 5 days are equal to basically 5 FTE. And so at some school, a choir teacher, which is going to serve hundreds of students, we're getting emails from Northville High School saying, why are you cutting our choir? But we're not doing that. It's the PTR and the FTEs that are doing that. We're cutting, kindergarten aides, things like that. I just feel like it is being misconstrued what the exchange is here. And I just hope that the public understands that those 5 FTE that it costs us for these 5 days for the ESSA employees is sacrificing services to students, such as choir classes, athletic coordinators, maybe even art classes or other things that are having to be sacrificed to pay for those 5 days. So it's not just coming from nowhere.
And just to clarify, Ms. Smith, 5 FTE certified staff, if you're looking at teaching assistants, things of that nature, it's 15 FTE those days.
I have Mrs. Matheson, Ms. Marati, and then Mr. Doran in the queue. Ms. Matheson.
Thank you. So I just needed clarification. My understanding was that assistant principals have come in and they've testified that they need an activities coordinator. And I wanted to make sure that everyone had heard that that's what they wanted. They don't want to take on the extra responsibility of an activities coordinator. They want an activities coordinator at their school. They've talked about how important it is to have these activities coordinators at the schools. And it's not just for sports, it's for music, it's for drama, it's for academic decathlon and things like that. So.
Can I respond to that, President Luke? Yes, thank you, Ms. Matheson. I recall a couple of different assistant principals coming in and testifying to that effect. Certainly many of the duties, if in the event that we reduce activity coordinators, many of the duties would fall to assistant principals. And so the thing to consider by the board is in a reducing environment, you know, we have another year or two of reductions. It's again identifying the reductions that have the least amount of impact directly on student instruction. And so in an area, in an environment where we're $10 million in the hole or $12 million in the hole and we have to reduce, you know, do you reduce activity coordinators or do you reduce classroom teachers? You know, and so I hear, and I've said this before, every employee in this district has a vital role. Everyone does. And I believe that firmly. It's kind of a situation where we're painted in the corner and our backs are against the wall. So a lot of the things that we've been throwing around, the ideas, are going to pop up again next year, unfortunately. And so I think, you know, this has been a good exercise just to look at the different areas of the district and prioritize. You know, as a board, you can see what positions are out there, what are we talking about, what are we discussing, you know, different positions, certain number of work days per year, et cetera, et cetera. We're, you know, through negotiations, we're talking salaries and the cost of benefits to the district. We have everything out on the table right now, and, you know, there's just going to be a lot of decisions, difficult decisions that are going to need to be made in the next 12 to 24 months, and it's a finite amount of resources that we have, and those are dropping. So, thank you.
I have Mr. Doran, Mrs. Smith, and myself in the queue.
Okay, thank you. A couple of observations. I want to speak to the ESSA days, and I would invite the administration to add in. But I can speak from experience from those days, parent-teacher conference days, et cetera, the importance of having EFSA staff there, of having the teacher aides, having the tutors there. A lot of times when parents come in, they come in to speak to both, because teacher and the aides work hand in hand. And that's important very often for parents to have both contacts, because they work with all those people in that classroom. If it's a special needs classroom, if it's tutoring, oftentimes there may be specific things that parents are looking for. And so this is to direct benefit of students for them, that as a staff, to be there. It is also really important for trainings. I've watched where trainings have been scheduled for certified teachers on one day, particularly during parent-teacher conferences to reduce um, uh, uh, interruptions for student services. And the certified teacher will go for training, and then the aides will go the next day. And it doesn't make sense because they work together. And we need to have the teacher and their aides working as a team. And so sometimes we've worked that for around parent-teacher conferences so they can go and really train together. And I did that for years. But it underscores the importance of the partnership that's there that has the direct benefit for the student because they are working together, and I think those conversations are very, very important. And so that's one reason why I'm very supportive of restoring these days, that as well as the fact of what it is for looking at retention and recruitment of our staff. But these are not wasted days. They're extremely important. The other thing is that I was thinking when people come to testify before us and make a case for something, I remember the times I came before the board and testified the importance of having assistant principals at elementary, and never did that go anyplace. It was still a valid request, but we couldn't afford it. And that was really the reason it never went forward. And when it got closest, it was actually proposed, it was dropped, couldn't afford it, and we got to the point where we'd say, okay, it could be considered on an individual basis, and we did have some over the years funded through Title I, one or two in schools, one school or possibly two schools, and we provided some backup support for some schools, but we've never got there. Yes, it's a good wish, it's a valid one, but we can't afford it. And I look at this now, and with the, and to my comment about athletic coordinator, activity coordinators, and thank you for the correction, it is activity, not just athletics. It's all the extracurriculars. System principals did that. We were able to afford to meet a real need of activity coordinators. We can't afford it now. The choice was have someone either as an activity coordinator or as a principal. We've decided earlier the principals. We put the system principals back in. They will take those responsibilities. So I'm just, the money, and I'm willing to stick my neck out that the governor is going to follow through on approving the budget as the legislature did. Very, very small step that the legislature did. And the governor's word seems to be that he's going to go along with it, that he's supportive of it, the increase in the BSA, for instance, as part of the READS Act. But I can take that step, but I am very, very cautious about going beyond what's a reasonable expectation.
I have Mrs. Smith, myself, Miss Marati, and Miss Smith in the queue. Mrs. Smith.
It's just for a special tongue twister challenge for everyone. Okay, I really appreciate what Mr. Doran just said about reasonable requests and reasonable sacrifice and doing reasonable things. So one of our testifiers also testified that this burden belongs to the taxpayers and to the borough. And when the borough had their, budget discussions, that was the time when people needed to show up over there to the borough. We had a borough assembly member who came here and testified to us that she had no idea that we had this need. And I know that Miss Luke, Miss Moline, Mr. DeGraw, like everybody went over there. This is public knowledge that we're millions and millions of dollars in the hole here. So I'm not sure why the Borough Assembly did not get the message loud and clear, but she specifically came and testified regarding these 5 days. And it's, under $700,000. And that the people need to go back to the borough and to the taxpayers and ask them if this is important to them, if this is what they want, then the borough has, I believe, more than 10, 12, $13 million buffer that they could go up to give to us. And so you're right, this is on the taxpayers. This is on the people of this borough to say, this is so important to us that we're willing to give our tax money to this. And this conversation should have been had at the Borough Assembly during the Borough Finance time. And that time has passed. If the public wants to go back to the Borough Assembly and start petitioning them for some kind of supplemental, that'd be great. But we're faced with the reality of what we have right here. And I think that our student rep asked for a reasonable behavior, which was to put student success first. And that no one has talked about doing 4 days instead of 5. I think that when you look at the impact of 1 day, yes, it's a lot, but it's not 5 days. And the impact that that would have on overall student success of being a team and saying, you know what, it's not what we really want. It's not fully funding the thing that we came here to ask for, but 4 days is better than no days, especially when it's can contribute to overall student success, which the student rep is representing the entire Region 6 student body. Seems like that's a valid point of view when they're asking us to regard student success for a small sacrifice. So I move to amend the FY 2022-2023 budget to include 4 days of the ESSA staff at a cost of $487,979.20, and by adding 2.5 FTE activities coordinators at a cost of $121,060.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have an amendment on the floor. Do you have a question, Mr. Doran?
Yes, trying to understand the amendment.
Mrs. Smith will speak to the amendment when she gets
Right.
back to her chair.
That's fine. Okay. So the amendment is to reduce the paid ESSA days to 4,
Instead of 5.
okay, and to add 2 activity coordinators.
2.5 activity coordinators, correct.
Okay, so one position. Okay.
One FTE, 12160. You'll see that on the bottom line right there, activity coordinators, 1 FTE, 12160. And 20% of the 609,974.
Okay, and where are you thinking those 0.5 would go to? Which schools?
To North Pole, to West Valley, and return the district-wide person to Lathrop.
Okay, yeah,
just
so that's a
seems
separate
so
one.
logical.
Okay, so that's a separate, the return of the district-wide is not included in that amendment.
Okay. Well,
I'm just asking for clarification.
yes, it is my intention that that 1 FTE
Okay.
district-wide would
So
return
North
to
Pole
Lathrop,
and West Valley.
so that all 5 high schools are returned their activities coordinators with only a sacrifice of 1 day from ESSA.
I do have people in the queue on other items, but because we have the amendment on the floor, is there anyone that would like to have a question or a clarifying thought or add to the discussion before we go to the vote on this amendment? Mr. Doran.
Thank you. I'm in opposition to this amendment. We've had extended conversation regarding the ESSA days. I do think that actually, in fairness to our staff, we should not be cutting their remuneration, which this does, whether it's by 1 day or 5. And I feel strongly that it should stay at the 5. We've been doing that for years. And part of the reason that was done was also not only to provide services that are important for student benefit, but also to help remunerate ESSA staff, which is among our lowest paid staff. And that effort was made several years ago. I want to see that continued and not see one unit take a cut in compared to others. I'm also really concerned about adding in the activities coordinators when part of our rationale for reinstating the assistant principals was that they would be able to do that, and they have, and that the amendment as presented leaves one school either out of having an activity coordinator, Lathrop, or if the intent is to come back with another amendment that district-wide will become a school-specific, it puts one school at a much higher level of support, that their numbers are comparable to the other high schools, the other big high schools, and there should be equity there. So on those fronts, I do not agree with this and will vote against this amendment.
Ms. Marati.
Thanks. I want to thank Mr. Doran for sharing his experience with the ESSA staff and how important they are. I am so tired of hearing that they are not just as important as other staff. I firmly believe that they do impact our student success. We have heard so much public testimony, including from students, that they need the 5 days, that they are suffering without it, and that it's vital. And we have an employee shortage. I don't think that the way that we've been talking about them and this decision is in support of them, and I think it'll be detrimental to our district. So I support putting their 5 days back into the budget. And if the board wanted the borough to pay for an additional activities coordinator, the team that presented to the borough should have asked for it at that time, but they didn't. That was not the wish of the board at that time. So I don't support this amendment.
Ms. Sanderson, and then Mrs. Smith.
I was just going to say I couldn't vote to support it either because, you know, we can sit here and talk about the shortages and how things are going to be, but the reality of it is principals have come and gone, teachers have come and gone, programs have come and gone, but ESSA staff is the variable that stays put. They don't always have the extra training that they should have had. They don't get paid for the certificates or the licenses that they hold and the duties that those licenses come with. And to continue to, we have to be careful not to put this kind of shadow over one part of our education team. I've always called them education support professionals because that's what I believe they are. They're trained, they come with passion and knowledge and skill set, just like our certified and administrators. So we just have to look at how we're going to do this. I've had a administration talk to me principal talked to me that they weren't going to be able to pick up these duties. I don't know how any of this is going to happen next year, but I know that the basic staff that we can keep in place to start our year off properly, to see where we're going to land. We don't even know what our student base is going to be. So I can support the memorandum that we have in front of us, but I can't support the amendment that's on the floor at this time.
Mrs. Smith?
Thank you. I just want to answer a few of the oppositions here. First of all, in no way was I indicating that we don't need our S staff. After 15 years of my daughter in special ed, S staff were the only people that virtually had contact with my daughter. And to Mr. Doran's comment earlier, I have never been permitted ever in one parent-teacher or IEP conference to speak to my daughter's S staff. They are not at any time in 15 years invited to an IEP meeting or allowed to speak during that time. So it's not one teacher, it's not one school. We're talking about if she went to 5 different schools, she had 7 different teachers. That's not what's happening in my experience. So no one's saying that I don't care about S staff. I'm saying that I care about student contact. I'm saying that I care about, student, the things that every day are impacting. And when I said that people should have gone to the borough to ask for money, I did not say to go to the borough to ask for money for ACs. I didn't say that athletic coordinators were our priority. I said that people should have went to the borough and asked for money for these 5 days. If this was our priority, we should have been the public, not the board, sure, if that was the board's priority. But if it's not the board's priority and we're saying this is the public's priority and our staff's priority, our staff and the public should have been over there at the borough asking for these 5 days because it was public knowledge that these 5 days were in there. And I didn't see anybody over there asking for these 5 days. So it has just become a focus of the board. But it didn't seem to be a focus of the taxpayers because no one came and asked for any of that money from the borough. And, I didn't see any employees over there asking for that money from the borough, and that's the only place we were looking to get money. So I never said that the activities coordinators were our priority or that we should ask the borough for that money. We should ask them for the money for the ESSA employees. And the taxpayers and the employees should ask for the money. It's just been a known thing. And as for the 1.0 at Lathrop, there has always been a 1.0 at Lathrop. If that's unfair, put forward an amendment to the amendment to make it a 0.5. But to disregard the entire thought of sacrificing one of the 5 days because it's not fair, just that doesn't seem appropriate or reasonable. And now I lost my train of thought on that. But the point is that also Ms. Sanderson said that we can't ask one section of our employees to bear the burden for everything. But we're not. We have laid off many teachers. We have reduced our employees in every single department. Our principals just took a 0 pay increase contract. I think everybody's pitching in here. Everybody is pitching in here. It's just something that's sticking out like a sore thumb is these 5 days. I'm not against the 5 days. I just said 4. It's just a compromise, just seems reasonable. And it seems like a win for students and a win for the ESSA employees to have 4 days instead of 0. So I stand by that, and I think, I don't feel like the board is feeling me on that, but I feel that it is important to me to put it out there. And also I wanted to say regarding the principals asking for the vice principals instead of the ACs, that's when they are faced with the choice of choosing between vice principals and activities coordinators. not between 4 days of ESSA and activities coordinators. So if anybody else has another solution, I'd be glad to vote for it if it's reasonable and meets students' needs, not overlook something that's important to them.
Okay, so just as a reminder, before we go to Mrs. Tuttle for the vote, a yes vote is in support of the amendment. A no vote is voting the amendment down. Mrs. Tuttle, could we get the roll call, please?
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Matheson?
Yes?
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
No.
Thank you. Amendment failed.
So currently, we are back to the original memorandum and budget as presented through our last work session, and that has been presented by administration. I currently have myself, Miss Marati, and also Miss Smith on the queue. And I guess I'll even speak to my vote. I'm not necessarily, I wasn't necessarily against it. Here's the deal is that we, for the last couple of years, this year, next year, the year after, are going to be in a position that we will have to cut budget. And what we are saving in our cares this year is going to be up next year. So what we're talking about is saving these positions for next year. And I'll just be straightforward. I am in agreement with what was presented and given to us in the memorandum. And I would go forward with this budget as presented. And it's going to be, next year is going to be another year where it's hard. Hard choices are going to have to be made. And there's only so much that we can get from the state. There's only so much we can get or even ask for from our local government. There's only so much we can get or ask for from our federal government. And I truly believe that we have a valuable district. We have incredible employees. We have incredible people. We have incredible students who are coming every single day and doing good inside the walls of our schools. And I'm grateful for that. And I think that we are at this point doing the best we possibly can to ensure success for next year. And with that being said, I would vote for this current budget as given tonight. Ms. Marati?
Hypothetically, Mr. DeGraw, if the governor vetoes the additional funding, does that mean, would admin propose to eliminate what's on the memo, the fiscal year 22-23 approved budget memo under the general fund expenditures?
So could you rephrase that one more time, Ms.
Yeah,
Marty?
sorry. If the governor decides to veto the additional funding, would the admin propose then to reduce back the budget by eliminating what's listed under expenditures, or would there be something else that we need to expect? Just like worst case scenario.
So yeah, that's a good question, Ms. Marty. I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for Ms. Moline, who's the ultimate decision maker for admin, but there would be many discussions about eliminating items that have been added back in. So so things like, the student activities is restoring a reduction, the 5 work days. And then there's CARES items that have been added back as well. So from my perspective, I would be having conversations with Ms. Moline about reducing additions to the CARES list as well. Things like the Hutch teachers, the counselors. And we don't, just for the record, we don't expect the governor to veto that one-time funding. This, for the record, is what administration, we feel there's a high likelihood that this is going to pass, that the revenue items in the top half are gonna be signed off on by the governor. Now that we could get surprised, but I doubt it. I mean, I think this is, if I was a betting person, I'd be betting on this. But to answer your question, yes, if a significant change were to occur, administration would come back to the board recommending some changes. I'll let Ms. Moline, that would be my position, so I'll let her.
Yeah. And like Mr. DeGraw said, it would be back to the table of looking at where are we going to make those adjustments. And one of the areas that would need to be considered is that of the fund balance. And at this point, we're putting a hefty amount back into our fund balance. So that would be someplace that we would have to look at adjusting. I think to not put something back in the fund balance would be irresponsible. But at the same time, that's where a good portion of this $5 million is in the budget, is in fund balance. So we would go back to the table, look at what was added back, look at what monies we do have, and start with what's been added back and go from there.
And just one final follow-up on this topic. Yes, it would, the loss of the 5 million one time would basically eliminate the addition to fund balance, and then the way we would approach it would be the concern centered around only $3 million in CARES rolling over to 24. That would be the concern. So we'd try to bolster the amount of dollars we expect to roll to the next year.
And I think, as we've said from the beginning of this process, approaching that 2-year step down, soft landing to no more CARES funding has kind of been our approach from the beginning. It's looking like it's going to be a harder and harder landing on that second year. But that would be our approach, continue to be our approach, is looking at our CARES money, how much we have left, and how soft we could make that landing with the funds that we have in general fund and our CARES funding.
Can I follow up? Thank you. When does the governor have until to sign? Is it the
He has till July 8th.
July 8th?
Yeah.
Okay, so if he signs July 8th and we need to make changes due to that, whatever comes to be, when does the board come back to discuss that?
We would just postpone that till August. So administration has a July 15th deadline to submit a budget to DEED. DEED is very aware of the situation and the late date that the governor has until, so they readily acknowledged, the district just needs to submit something by the 15th, which we wouldn't be able to wait till the 8th and then be able to turn around and get that. We need a little bit more time than that. So short answer to your question, Ms. Marati, is it's perfectly acceptable for the board to make those amendments, adjustments in August or early September.
Thank you. And I have one more question, if that's okay. And kind of the same family.
Go ahead.
Okay. Are you just as confident in the one-time funding in the additional foundation funding as you are in the one-time funding? That 714,125.
Yeah, I'm equally confident, which is very confident, especially the governor stated several times that additional funding was dependent on a READS Act. That was his spokespeople, and he himself were very open with that contingency for any additional funding. He wanted a READS Act. So very confident in the 714, are those dollars. And then we just don't, again, hopefully we don't have a surprise, but we don't have anything to indicate that there's going to be a change to those one-time dollars.
Okay, thank you.
I have Miss Smith, Mrs. Sanderson, and Mr. Doran on the queue.
I probably wouldn't have come to this meeting today if it wasn't for the fact that it's the budget. I'm here to represent the students and do what's right for our students' success. And I feel like if anyone, I understand how important the activities director is, and I hate like restating it over and over again, but they are so, so, so important. Throughout my past 3 years of high school, I've participated in probably at least 10 different things, including 3 different sports managements, culinary clubs, special education programs, all that stuff. There's no way that I could imagine any assistant principal that I've had experience with doing the job of an activities director. When they come and testify, I absolutely believe them when they say that they need an activities coordinator. So my question is, could a building administration use 0.5 FTE from their PTE to fund an activities coordinator for just their school if they wanted?
Just make sure I understand your question, Ms. Smith. Are you asking if a school can repurpose an FTE that they receive in another capacity into an activity coordinator? Is that your question?
Yeah.
The short answer is yes, they can.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Sanderson?
Mr. DeGraw, I just had a question for you. Have we heard from our lobbyist? What is the feel? What is he talking? In the second part of that would be the appropriation for the reading the next 2 years, well, this year, and I guess this year, and the next 2 years, for a total of 3 years, impact money for this reading initiative that is hanging there. But I just want to know, what is our lobbyist talking about, and then the impact of where you see this reading money?
Yeah, so Mr. Ringstad he echoes what I've just communicated to the board, indicated that he has not seen or heard anything to lead him to believe that there would be a surprise. So again, we're knocking on a lot of wood, but no indications from Mr. Ringstad either on surprises. And then I'm not sure I understood the
So
question.
if I could just add to that, the additional funding to the BSA that is in the READS Act is to the BSA. It's not necessarily a part of other components of the READS Act. There are other options for funding within the READS Act, but one piece of that is the BSA. And once that increase is there, it's there. And everyone that receives the BSA receives that extra $30. So that's a living forward amount, but the additional one time is separate than that. Does that answer your question?
So it's a permanent increase, Ms. Sanderson. That $30 increase to the BSA, it's permanent.
And the follow-up to that is that money is for staffing? No staffing, it's strictly for...
Whatever we use our BSA for is what that money can be used for. There's no attachment. As in some of the funding that's in that READS Act, there are attachments. The increase to the BSA is not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you. As I've stated before, I'm supportive of the motion and cognizant of the different things and in confirmation of what several people have mentioned. As I've talked to some of the legislators and staff members of the legislators, over the last several weeks, it's been consistent that they anticipate that in education, the governor will sign off on the different pieces. The budget, he has until July 8th, and on the Alaska Reads Act, he has until July 20th. But, and having lived through a budget at one point that was, the governor did veto education funding significantly back in the mid-'80s. That happened in after the half of July, and districts had to deal with it. Hopefully and no indications are that we will have to deal with that this year. So I feel confident in moving ahead with the plan as we have, and if that scenario changes and the governor thinks otherwise, then we will have to deal with that. I'm also very, very cognizant that we are, in a sense, moving forward for 1 year. We have a major challenge that has not gone away. We are not being adequately funded by the state for public education. And we're way, way behind on cost of operation increases over the years. We are nowhere near getting to that, even parity this year with one-time funding and the very minor adjustment to the BSA. That being said, we want to say a big thank you to the legislature and hopefully to the governor for doing it. It at least is something, some effort. I look at this year as also a continued transition from the pandemic years. And we do know, hearing from staff and from students and from parents, while this past year was a better year than the previous two, it was still a very tough year. And we're still in a transition. And I think our staff, our students, our families have put out a tremendous amount of effort and energy and emotion and passion to do the best that we could. And this helps us continue that, even though a year from now we are going to be facing some very, very tough decisions again, budget-wise. I am particularly glad to see student activities funding added back in, some being restored there. There was a significant cut. I think, yes, that is a very important piece for student benefit with extracurriculars, and to make that support there. I think that'll make a difference for what schools can offer in those activities. So, that among the other adjustments we've made are important. And with that, I look at it in terms of saying what we've added back were cut from the budget. What we're looking to add back were completely out of the budget. And these are priorities that then we have said, let's bring these back. And I think they're appropriate priorities. If we had more money, we'd be adding on to those priorities. If the state had come through with a real BSA increase, we might have been being able to do more for students and families. And with that, I want to say a big thank you to the borough and for those community members who went and advocated on behalf of education, because the borough gave us 2.6 additional dollars, $2 million that we directly asked for and was not in the mayor's proposed budget, but he did not oppose the addition of it. But because I think of that testimony from community members and the thoughtfulness of the Borough Assembly, they not only gave us that $2 million that we asked for in our initial request, but then gave us another 600, I think 650,000 to help specific, with an intent to a specific area, but recognizing they don't tell us line items what to do with our money. They allocate it. That's our job. And so I think in terms of looking at those types of things to It's our job to decide the line items. I think we've done a lot. We'd love to do a lot more. I think this represents a lot of compromise. Um, and I think it's a responsible effort on our part, given what we have, what we know, and what we need to have in place for this coming year, at least minimally. And so I'm fully supportive of where we're at, and we'll take it one step at a time beyond that as monies come or go.
I've got one more person in the queue, and then we will go to the vote. Mrs. Smith?
Thank you, Ms. Luke. I just wanted to call the question, so I'm happy to go to the vote.
Okay. We are, just as a reminder to the public, we are voting for our budget for next year. With the additions in the memorandum that was given to us of the kindergarten assistants, student activities, 5 paid workdays to ESSA, transfer to nutrition services, adjustment to TERS and PERS, addition to fund balance, adjustment to charter schools, the 3 high school counselors, the 2 reinstated teachers at Hutch, the 1.0 activity coordinators, or really it's the 2.5 FTE, and the contracted 1,000 payment to FPA and non-represented. So that would be what is on the table. A yes vote would be approving this budget moving forward, and as explained in the recommended action, and a no vote would be no. Mrs. Tuttle?
Did Mr. Doran's original main motion, I assume, let's see. Yeah, Mr. Doran's main motion include the amendments in his language, or did you want to do a separate amendment to it, of those, that whole list, to his main motion?
It's included.
Included.
It covers, in my understanding, unless the administration has said something different in that, it includes the CARES, it includes the operating, it includes all of that.
Yes.
Mrs. Tuttle, so the recommended action or motion that's on the floor is what was stated in the agenda. And that does that fully include what was presented in the memorandum? Or are you?
If that was Mr. Doran's intent, that
Correct.
it includes that, yes, and it was
Okay.
clear on the public record.
Perfect. So that would be a yes, that we are approving budget as is. A no would be that you are not approving budget.
Okay.
Mrs. Tuttle?
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Matheson?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Thank you. That being our main item on the agenda, it has passed. We have a budget for next year as long as we get word back from the governor that he approves what we expect him to approve. If not, then we will be reconvening at a future time. On that note, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Any objection? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.